My name is Agáta Šústovou Drelovou. I'm a researcher at the Institute of History, Slovak Academy of Sciences. And here with me in the studio is Professor Timothy GARTON ASH, Professor of European Studies at the University of Oxford. Professor GARTON ASH, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
My first question would be about the character of 1989 revolution. Was it a liberal revolution?
Well, first of all, it was a peaceful, self-limiting revolution, and that's what makes it so original. The model of 1989 supplanting the violent model of 1789. But it was not so clearly a liberal revolution in the sense of wanting simply to emulate the Western liberal democratic and democratic capitalist model as it rapidly became, because in the nature of revolutions, it's a spontaneous explosion of popular demands and wishes.
So what happened to liberalism after 1989? Many are now questioning the sort of liberal narrative of not only 1989, but also of the transformation after 1989. So what happened to liberalism? And is there perhaps a time for a sort of liberal self-reflection?
I think it absolutely is, but the first thing to say is, you know, we've achieved a lot in a quarter century of, if you like, liberal revolution after 1989. I mean, most of the countries of Europe are still liberal democracies. Most of them are members of the European Union and NATO. That's a better Europe than we've had for most of European history. And in a sense, what we now have is a global anti-liberal counter-revolution. But I do think that liberals have to do a rigorous job of self-criticism. Number one, we became complacent, hubristic. We thought this was the way history was going. History never goes just in one direction. Secondly, we allowed liberalism to be reduced to a kind of closed system of thought, a kind of closed ideology, and we developed a kind of liberal determinism, which is a contradiction in terms, because history is always open. And thirdly, we reduced liberalism to the single dimension of economic liberalism, and within economic liberalism, we allowed the democratic capitalist system to plunge into a major crisis and unprecedented levels of inequality to develop within our societies. And those were quite serious faults. Fortunately, the great strength of liberalism, unlike communism, unlike fascism, unlike Islamism, unlike all other competing ideologies, is that to its very essence belongs the capacity for self-criticism.
So what is your understanding of the rise of populism, not only in Central and Eastern Europe, but also globally?
So that many elements come together in it. Some of them I've mentioned, the economic inequality, the economic crisis, also what I call the inequality of attention and respect. That's to say, it's not just that people in some regions of our countries, poorer people, felt they were poor while other people were getting rich. It's that they felt completely ignored and disrespected by liberal elites sitting in the capitals far away, right? People welcoming globalization. But I think another way of thinking about it is that we've had 30 years of relentless change, globalization, liberalization, Europeanization, digitalization. So for someone sitting in a small town in Slovakia or Eastern Poland, everything has changed. And at a certain point it just becomes too much, too fast, overwhelming, and people literally react and reach back for more familiar sources of identity, such as the family, the church, the nation. And one has to understand that, and then the populists come along and skillfully exploit these entirely understandable yearnings. So the people are not wrong to have those reactions. That's a human, entirely human reaction. What is wrong is the way that they are exploited by populists to produce policies which ultimately are not going to benefit anyone.
So what do you think is the remedy for the situation? And could we perhaps find a sort of genuinely liberal remedy for the current situation?
That is what we have to do. We need a rejuvenated, reformed, if you like, a more modest and sober and cautious liberalism, which understands that we try to go too far too fast, neglecting so many people who were left behind. So, for example, we have to reduce the levels of inequality in our societies, both economic and cultural inequality. We have to do more for people, both economically and in terms of education. That will be one big thing. We have to recognize that people get very unhappy when they feel that immigration is totally under control. So it's not about stopping immigration, it's about managing immigration. Those would be two very big things that a reformed liberalism would have to do. And we have to understand that it's not Europe or the nation, it's Europe and the nation. That the first homeland and the second homeland go together.
Professor GARTON ASH, thank you very much for this interview.
It's a pleasure.